Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor, Greg Dooley, and the Pundit, Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
It's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark, and we're presented by Nick Hopwood, who's a certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. We highly recommend going to Nick's website at peakwm.com, although he may be surfing on some other Michigan websites at this moment, Greg.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Texas making a statement in Ann Arbor. The Michigan undefeated streaks come to an abrupt stop in a 31-12 rout. The 16-game winning streak, the 29 regular season game streak, the first loss in front of a home crowd since 2019. And for the first time in the history of the Professor and the Pundit, we're talking about a loss.
And I'm guessing a few of you came here for some therapy, and I'm going to start with the guy right across the glass from me. He looks a little glum. Steve, you know all this is not your fault, right?
No, it's not my fault.
It's not your fault, Steve.
Yeah, no, I heard you. It's not my fault.
What happened on Saturday, Steve? It's not your fault. You know that, right?
You better stop, man. I mean, I told you that.
Steve, it's not your fault.
Hey.
Come here. Give me a hug.
Dang it, Greg!
Not you, Greg. Steve, it's not your fault. It's not any of our faults. But we tend to look at ourselves in these moments, don't we? And that's what the team is doing right now. They are picking up the pieces. I like to think of it, Steve, this was kind of the sum of all fears. I don't think people thought we were going to win this game, reasonable minds. But for this game and for the season outlook, it's grim on the day we record this. And really, for once in a long time, we had a game where you just didn't have a lot to cheer about in the entire game.
To me right now, the Michigan offense under 2 games is what I feared about in the offseason, but there was no reason really to bring it up beforehand because then you just sound pessimistic, you seem cynical, and there's absolutely no evidence of it. You're just kind of guessing and projecting, and if you're going to guess and project negative, what kind of person are you? You know, so,
right.
But now here we are.
Well, there were things to be optimistic about it because we have reloaded the last few years. Okay, so maybe there was more than we thought or hoped. Second, this offense was practicing against this great defense, right? That, okay, maybe it's making them better and they'll be ready. We didn't see it. So, again, we were hoping, and Steve, you put it so well. The hope was we were reloading. Clearly, we are rebuilding. Our offensive line, we just flat out got out-muscled out there on Saturday. And even the D-line, we didn't have that depth. We were pretty well handled by Texas.
Yeah, said it on this podcast, talked about it on the air in WTKA. This offensive line from Texas is one of the best in the nation, and it made it one of their offseason goals to win that Joe Moore Award, and they created the holes necessary for their interior run game, but they were also, just to be honest, a little too fast on the perimeter. Texas was able to turn the corner at times, beat Michigan defenders to the spot, and they would end up getting extra yards.
Okay, and we another group that we hoped would gel was that secondary. Even with some of the talent we had back there, clearly exposed at many junctures, especially third downs and in the red zone when they needed it most.
Texas had a huge time of possession lead on Michigan, and normally you would think that if the offense can't help you out, that's going to put too much pressure on the defense to carry them. But this really wasn't a story, Greg, of the wheels falling off at the end. Texas was converting 3rd and long after 3rd and long. Longhorns in the first half, 8 of 10 on 3rd down with an average distance of 8 yards to go. So this wasn't about converting 3rd and manageable. This was mostly about converting 3rd and long. Michigan defensively would win on 1st and 2nd down, but Texas got what they wanted when they needed it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Quarterback play, too. We weren't expecting our quarterback to be Quinn Ewers, but he was outstanding.
Quinn Ewers didn't get rattled during this one, and a lot of people see that as the recipe for success against Quinn Ewers. Put some pressure on him. He'll make some mistakes on his own. And he did get some pressure, but he was able to escape it. And when he did, he bought that extra second or two that allowed him to scan down the field with open eyes to find the open guy just about every time. It's one of JJ's best traits, is to be able to move around, buy an extra second, find somebody down the field and take care of it.
Yeah, and so looking at Davis Warren, mediocre at best, and now we're going to start to hear those whines. And that's speculation. Why didn't we hit that transfer portal? And it's starting to come out on Twitter. You're going to hear it a while. We were bottled up all day. And you talked about their third downs. Michigan converted just 3 of our third downs.
Right.
What a huge difference.
It was like 3 of 12 or something like that.
Yeah.
Neither quarterback for Michigan is playing at the expected level. You simply just don't replace J.J. McCarthy with a walk-on and an athlete. Davis Warren is about as playing as I would have expected, but I didn't have too much of a high ceiling for him on that. And I think that's why some people thought if there is a quarterback battle, you might as well just rest your laurels with the higher ceiling guy in Alex Orji. But clearly the coaching staff, who I trust, and I assume you do too,
we have to.
realizes that Davis Warren is the guy who's going to give you the better chance of winning.
Yeah, and there were gut punches in the game. It was clearly those third downs. It was a few of the turnovers, of course, but then, like from a schematic standpoint, putting Orji in there on a couple of those third down and mediums where they just snapped the ball and he clearly was planning on running, and everybody in the stadium knew it, and Texas knew it, and he was bottled up. It was really frustrating. You see, Steve, it really hit me.
Yes,
man.
yeah, that's where we need a hug sometimes. I mean, every time I saw him go out in the field, I literally put my head down because I knew he was running it. And you just said you knew he was running it, and you thought everybody in Texas knew that he was doing it. They pretend as if he's going to possibly hand it off to someone else, but he might as well just take it out of the Wildcat by himself and just go. Because when you take the ball and you fake the handoff, you're losing time to go wherever you want to go. The Michigan coaching staff has made it clear to me, at least, that Alex Orji isn't ready to be the starter.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
Yeah, it like in that Jalen Milroe last play of the Rose Bowl that we all know, they said, well, he could have done this, he could have done that, but it clearly looked like Milroe in that Rose Bowl. His intent was try to run for it. Okay, he had the weird snap. It looked like the same thing with Orji. Maybe there were some options he had in there, but clearly his intent was to run the ball. You assume that was the first option. It was horrible. Speaking of gut punches, a fluke play. And as fans, what you're doing is you're doing that math. Okay, if we can just score here, which is such a sad place to be.
Yes.
Yeah, if we just score here, we go into the locker room or we go into this sequence just down this. If Loveland scores, I believe we could have cut it to 7, Steve, because it was 17-3. Yeah, he tosses it to Loveland. Loveland turns. It looks like he makes a football play. I don't know if that's a college rule or what, but he does look like he makes a play, but it's close. Inexplicably, but no one even around him. The ball just slips out of his hand. And then Texas goes right down the field in a few plays, goes up 24-3, and it felt like a knockout punch.
It was the defining moment of the game. So here you have Michigan, who's not had an explosive play, essentially. Colson Loveland gets it, and it looks like he has open turf in front of him. Not enough for a touchdown, but some open turf, something to be excited about. And then does something that most people just never, ever really do in a game. The ball leaves you like in first grade. I remember doing this in first grade, running around with the football and then just the motion of my arm not having a great grip on the ball and lost it. And then the double whammy is that it's Colson Loveland, who you would never, ever want to criticize during a game.
Sure-handed
yes.
is somewhere in the 3 or 4 words that you describe his game, right? Sure-handed tight end, right? Reliable.
Might be the best hands on the offense.
Right.
Okay. So this happens.
Some of the best in the conference, maybe the country. He's probably going to break every Michigan tight end receiving and catches record, okay? I can't even believe it.
So that's the double whammy. And then the triple whammy is Michigan's defense needs to play defense for about a minute and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's 24-3 at half. And I thought, like you, yeah, it's pretty much over. And now you're worried about those other games that come through people's minds, like the complete undressing that could potentially happen. And I don't think it did. I think of the Oregon game in 2007.
Yeah.
Looked like a complete undressing. And then the Donovan McNabb game with Syracuse, again, just off the heels of winning a national championship in 1998, game number 2, sort of the same thing.
Yeah, I remember the Wisconsin game where they ran the ball like we did at Penn State and just knew we could not possibly stop them. It was humiliating. The Oregon game, though, it stands out to me, Steve, as the biggest eye opener. I mean, I saw the McNabb game and what he did to us, but that Oregon game, we weren't even competitive.
It was the week right after App State.
Yeah, and I do feel like it's weird, but yeah, the App State game was embarrassing and it hurt, but they were a pretty good football team. And I'm sorry, and I know everyone still talks about it, but it was the next week. To me, that was like, oh my God. Plus, you had App State in the rearview mirror. So clearly, the message was delivered that you're not this top 5 team that you think you are until you fix it. And just getting our doors blown off, it was wild.
And then the strangest thing about it, Greg, is, and this is the one thing I love saying, is Michigan was 1-1 against defending national champions. Lost to App State, who were the FCS or Division II at the time, but beat Florida.
Right that year.
So if this may give you some hope as a Michigan fan that by the end of the year you can come back and beat a team that was as good as the Florida Gators were a year ago.
Yeah, well, there are some bright sides, and we'll get to that, but we can't finish here. I got to say, like, so
we're not done with therapy yet.
We're not done yet, guys. So Sharon Moore wants to smash you.
Yeah.
But you have to ask. When you're not smashing, what do you do? Right? What do you do? And I like the motto. I like the identity. I like having an identity. It's important. The Lions, Detroit Lions having an identity. He wants to have that. But what are you going to do when you can't smash people and you're not? Is it over?
Over? Did you say over?
Nah, you just keep going back to work. But Michigan's offensive line right now isn't enforcing their will through the first 2 games. It's not bully ball. Michigan had 1 rush from Donovan Edwards that was more than 10 yards on Saturday. They don't have a rushing touchdown this season. I think by now everybody knows that, but you talk about your identity, smash, running the football, no rushing touchdowns yet. So this season is amazing. Michigan hasn't found anything to rely on yet. They aren't executing that identity, but they're still exuding confidence that it all can be corrected.
Yeah. So I brought up the portal, Steve.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this privately. I think we've mentioned it a little bit here. There's a lot of people asking questions, and with our new age of college football, there's a lot of different areas you can go. You can say recruiting. You used to say recruiting. You used to say development. You used to say strength and conditioning. But now we have this other thing, portal.
Right.
Because you can now fix your team or fix your needs. Everyone's looking at quarterback, and there's a lot of guys that technically we could have looked at. And we're not sitting here like saying we would have done better, but we know these topics, they should be addressed. Like, there were quarterbacks out there that right now we think could have helped Michigan. Doesn't mean we're giving up on our quarterback situation, but given where we are, I think it's reasonable to ask the question, right?
In the aftermath of all that's going on, I think most people are asking, most pundits are asking, why didn't Michigan get another quarterback, an experienced quarterback in this situation? One, I think they got to be somewhat surprised of the lack of development that's happened over the last 2 years. And I will say that Davis Warren is still performing better than what I expected based on what I have seen just in a spring ball game and an occasional mop-up duty. But let's look at the alternatives. Who is available? I mean, Dylan Gabriel's a Heisman Trophy candidate. He's at Oregon. Why wasn't he even asked about Michigan? Well, I can tell you that he was transferred to Oregon on December 9th. Michigan's not even in the Rose Bowl yet or the national championship.
We were making Rose Bowl plans, my man.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Harbaugh hasn't left yet. J.J. McCarthy has, this is way beyond. You just don't go and put this quarterback right in the middle of your championship hunt with its announcement.
Clearly bigger fish to fry, like literally the biggest fish to fry.
Arizona's got a great quarterback in Noah Fafita. He wasn't going in the portal. He's still staying at Arizona. Cam Ward is an interesting one because he transfers to Miami January 13th, but I did a little bit of digging today. That one could be debated a bit, but he had declared for the NFL draft on New Year's Day. Then there was the testing out of the process about where he would be drafted. Meanwhile, there seems to be some sort of 7-figure and escalating bidding war between Miami and Florida State. Did Michigan want to be a part of that? I don't know. Was it too late to even be involved in that? Maybe Cam Ward wouldn't have been a good culture fit. Maybe it's not the desirable offense. I don't know. I'm just throwing out possibilities, Greg. But that is the one guy that I'm kind of looking at as probably needs a little bit more digging into.
Okay.
But Riley Leonard at Notre Dame, He transferred on December 13th.
Are we going to talk about Notre Dame, by the way?
I think we will.
Okay,
I think
go
we
ahead.
are a little later in the podcast.
Okay.
Will Howard transferred in January just before the Michigan season was over. And quite frankly, at this point now, we're starting to argue whether it's really worth it.
Yeah.
Aiden Childs was transferring to wherever Jonathan Smith was going, and it happens to be going to Michigan State. Will Rogers, guy at Washington, we're going to be facing them on October 5th. Stylistically, I know is not the right fit for the Michigan offense. He did not play very well in a pro-style system with Mississippi State last year.
Excellent.
So-
I think you forgot somebody, though.
Go ahead.
Kyle McCord.
Kyle McCord was
Why
at
not?
Syracuse. Well, why not? It's because, no. But he would be up there. But no, you
I
can't
threw a
do that.
curveball to the
No,
Pundit.
you can't do that.
All right.
You can't take Kyle McCord.
Okay. All right, you can't
Kyle,
take him.
Kyle McCord had already made his decision on Syracuse. But
So what you did, Steve,
Yeah.
was just basically like, don't just say we should have got a quarterback in the portal. What you did was just basically break down all the reasonable candidates. And it turns out there really wasn't like this pick of the litter with the schedule, with fit, whatever. It's not as easy as everyone said.
and
Yeah,
Michigan was somewhat handicapped by how far their season was going.
Yes, well, guilty. Right?
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, we obviously played 15 games well into the last game of the season, so we didn't have this opportunity to do all these chess moves. Right. Okay.
And the thing is, they also didn't take a quarterback in the class of 2023, and they missed on a couple of others that they wanted to get.
Yeah.
You know?
All right. That was the downside. So, Mr. Brightside, Steve.
Yeah.
Texas is really looking the part. Can we agree? They might be the most complete team in the country. And if you want to see the bar, if you want to get measured early in the season, we just got measured. And that's probably a team that at a minimum is going to be deep into the playoffs. Okay. Who knows? But we got to see it. We got a ton of film study against a great team. Not what we wanted, but Steve, is this the end of the world?
No.
So everyone come off the ledge. I know it's hard to listen on the ledge, but if you're on the ledge, I heard a few people at Oscars on the ledge, Steve.
Hopefully, Greg, no one broke or tore any of their 2023 championship memorabilia.
And hopefully all of you kept your dignity on social media. I know I saw some people lose their dignity. Yeah.
Some didn't.
So
There's always a tendency in the moment, though, Greg, that things are worse than
course.
they actually are.
Of course.
And we're going to try to help the two of us with reality versus overreaction. The team talks about corrections and how they can change their production. This is one of three, now even four, opportunities to make a statement to the College Football Playoff Committee. They have a tune-up game with Arkansas State, but now on the 21st, not too far off the horizon, is USC, a team with a ranked win over LSU. They, too, like Texas, have an explosive offense and a new defensive coordinator, also from that Harbaugh and Ravens coaching tree in Danton Lynn. They got a shutout with Utah State, but that means it's just critical to show some remarkable improvement over the next couple of weeks.
yeah, so on the bright side, we talked about the schedule so much and how concerning it was or whatever. Exciting, but also this is going to be brutal. Well, now's the bright side because now we do have that chance at redemption. That playoff you talked about, we're going to face these teams, so we clearly have it. And there were some bright spots. We talked about Loveland, despite the crazy catch and fumble. He played a great game. 8 catches, 70 yards. He's the guy. He's a star. Samaj Morgan, my man, a great play to run, catch and run, and then the stretch, which they called down inside, not a score on the field, reviewed it. He clearly stretched and made it over. My man scored.
So happy that they overturned that because he seemed to deserve that touchdown.
Yeah.
It could have been given to somebody else in the run game over the top or through the, something like that. It just wouldn't have seemed right. Samaj Morgan earned that touchdown.
Yeah.
And I like the fact, surprisingly, if you want to be unrealistic but still be Mr. Brightside, Michigan outscored Texas in the second half.
Okay, there you go. Steve.
They outscored them 9-7.
All right, let's make a bumper sticker. That's going to fly off the shelves.
That's right.
All right.
But what it does say is they didn't give up. I mean, the offense could have put it, in the closet. The defense could have said goodnight. Could have done what a certain Colorado quarterback did 2 minutes before the game was over. Michigan didn't do that.
Burn. Okay, and then of course we got a hell of a kicker, Steve. This guy can make field goals.
Dominic Zavada.
Yeah, he's
got 3 field goals over 50 yards so far this year.
That's a nice surprise. So let's score some more touchdowns. Steve, I need a break. I need to get my thoughts back together. This is our therapy session, but we got to talk about some sights and sounds because it was a really cool morning before the game. And we got to get to Arkansas State. Is there anything to worry about? And then we got to take a quick spin around the league.
Let's head to half.
All right.
Nick, sometimes Greg and I do interviews. Do you interview new prospective clients?
That's probably one of the first things you do with people after you get to know them is, okay, we got to understand, what are your goals, right? I would assume these are conversations you have, which are all variables for you.
Yeah, we want to understand what your goals are and what's important to you. Those are some of the first conversations that we want to have. Okay, I hate talking about budgeting, but I do have a sweet spreadsheet where I track expenses and net worth each month. This is kind of like a minimum thing that everyone should be doing, but nobody does. Because if you're spending $15,000 per month living your life right now, we need to say, what expenses will still be there in retirement, and maybe your mortgage will be paid off, and maybe the kids will be out of the house. So you only need $10,000 a month. But here's the problem. People just don't know what that goal is. When I ask people, what are your cost of living? They start adding up their expenses in real time. I want you to do real homework for months and months. A lot of people still don't do it, but it's mission critical, in my opinion.
I'm guessing a lot of people don't want to do that because it's frightening.
Yeah, it's painful. You have to look inward and really, deal with your demons, kind of a thing.
And especially today with all the subscriptions it kind of gets lost because there's Netflix here and Amazon Prime just hit and my Costco subscription just renewed. All this stuff adds up pretty fast and it can be a little frightening, but you got to do it. You got to know. So that's interesting to me.
Thanks, Nick. And if you want to ask some financial questions or if you have concerns or if you just want some tax advantage strategies at the end of the year, why don't you give Nick a call at 734-681-7575 or at peakwm.com, 734-681-7575 or peakwm.com. Welcome back to The Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark. The second half now. Now we've aired our laundry out.
Yeah,
the therapy session is over.
I prefer to air dry. I prefer to air dry, Steve. Yeah.
That's what the clothes all say now.
Okay.
We don't need dryers anymore. We just need to hang them out in the backyard.
But you ran into
crazy.
You ran into Connor Stallions after the game.
Crazy.
Is this real? That
no,
seems like a
real.
punchline of a joke. Okay.
It was real. I was heading out of the parking lot after the press conference, going through the Victor's lot. And, there's multiple rows of the Victor's lot. And I remember going to one area and it's like, am I going to choose right or am I going to choose left? So I go left and somebody recognizes me as I'm going by and it says, hey, Steve. So I turn over, see the person I'm familiar with, start talking about the game, all the things, what it means, having our own little therapy session. And then he decides he wants to bring his buddy Connor into the conversation. So he calls Connor over. And I look at him. Dude looks like Connor Stallions. So we talk. Now, I didn't get starstruck or anything like that. Just talked to him like he was a normal dude at a tailgate party. We talked about the game. We talked about Michigan's future. He had some insight on that. We were in a real comfortable moment where I was about ready to grab a beer and let's really sit down.
Let's dance.
We probably talked for about 5 or 10 minutes, just kind of feeling things out. And I think I was just about ready. Okay, let's talk next level. He seems like he's ready to talk about whatever is on his mind or whatever he's willing to share. And unfortunately, at that point, all of a sudden, some other people knew exactly who he was and all of a sudden enveloped him like
he was Elvis Presley.
And it was over. In hindsight, I just wanted to say, excuse me, but no, just let that conversation go on, thinking it might last a minute or two. 15 or 20 minutes later, there's a bigger lineup. Now some of the students from the game have realized who's there. Now there's a bigger lineup that want to have a conversation. He's having a good time. That's fine. I'm starting to look like an idiot waiting for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I decided time to move on. Opportunity lost. Opportunity lost.
All right.
Yes. So
That's
now we both have something in common.
That we both met. Maybe it was our fault. All right. So I got to say, did you run into any Texas fans? I did, Steve. They were kind. They were respectful. They were complimentary about the environment. This is before the game. Likewise after. They came in. Yes, they spent a bunch of money in Ann Arbor. You couldn't get a hotel, from here to Flint, Michigan, if you know the area. They were cool. I gotta say, they were
was
fun.
surprised.
Yeah, they were fun. They were kind. You kind of like that Notre Dame-ish.
Yeah.
Mutual respect.
I was surprised because when I read an article about the worst fan bases in America, Texas was amongst the top.
Somebody right now is going, yeah, but there was this jerk next to me. Of course there was a jerk.
Of course there was a jerk.
Guess what? There was a Michigan jerk next to you, too. Okay, yeah, so, yeah.
It's all there. But yes, I got the same experience. I thought the team was respectful. I thought Sarkisian was respectful.
Probably took the foot off the gas a little bit. Thank you. But anyway.
That part was not a bad experience. I did read something interesting, and I don't know if it ever came into fruition or not, but you talked about the Graduate, the hotel chains on college campuses, and Ann Arbor has one of them, Michigan State has one, Bloomington, Indiana has one. Apparently it's owned by a Texas Longhorn graduate and big football fan, and there was a rumor about Texas flags hanging out the front door of the Ann Arbor Graduate.
So
I don't know if that happened or not.
I heard that Cooper Manning paid the Graduate in Ann Arbor to fly the Texas flag from a pretty good source.
Okay.
Yeah. Or something to his friend who owns the thing, or maybe Cooper Manning is one of the owners. Who knows what Cooper's up to? He's become a bit of a celebrity.
Yes.
I know he was at the game.
Unfortunately, Cooper Manning has become the fourth most respected family member.
That's right.
He has dropped to fourth behind his own son.
That's right. I did see those two. Steve, did you see my Twitter? Those two giant... There's those type of dogs that kind of look like Marmaduke. They're big, like oversized dogs, but they look like cows.
Newfoundlands?
I don't know.
Okay.
But really cute. One was a boy, one was the woman had a little plush horns on them, like Max in The Grinch. You know, his dog when he put the horns.
Right.
But these were not heavy horns that squashed
him down.
Max into the snow. These were, and they were so cute. And so I thought I got a kick out of that. Check my Twitter feed at @MVictor if you want to see that. I did bump into Coach Beeline, Coach Hutchins, Bev Plocky, Bonnie Thole. I saw Sean Bourmet the night before. And it's funny, I mentioned those legends, but those current coaches, I just feel like them and their sports. Plocky because she's the legendary gymnastics coach. Bonnie Thole because we have the iconic softball program. And Sean Bourmet, which is a very, very well-respected and really gets a lot of TV ratings, is wrestling. I mention them because I feel like them and their programs and their teams here at Michigan are some of the ones I'm most curious about where they fit with revenue sharing and NIL and the scholarship limits that we've talked about here a little bit. What are they going to get? And so I'll just tell you, I'll net it out. I did not learn very much. But it's fascinating because I do know this. Other programs are recruiting, assuming that some of these things are happening. And I'm not sure Michigan's doing that yet. So it'll be really, really curious to see where they go. Does Bev Plocky get a full slate of scholarships and some of the revenue? Does Sean Bourmet move from 9.9 scholarships to a full complement? These are questions on my mind that in my class and otherwise and through my own research, I want to find out.
Yeah, and I think Ward Manuel earlier this week talked about having a fully funded athletic department. We also thought this week that Sharon Moore had a contract as well. So
that was weird. So that came up. It actually, Pat McAfee confronted him about it, and he looked down at the ground and said, "I'm being paid," and he kind of said things that like I'm being taken care of, but he never said, "No, I have a contract." So I don't know what the truth is.
It was strange that because I could be completely wrong, and we'll get this in the feedback if I am.
Yeah.
That Ward Manuel brought it up in an interview. And I thought it was
still working on his contract.
Yeah, and it's like, why bring it up when you go through the picture signing of Sharon Moore signing his contract and calling it a memo of understanding and all that? And it makes me think that they went out ahead and did it before a story broke, that it hadn't happened yet. And that's the only reason why I would think anybody would even initiate this conversation to begin with. That's pure speculation on my part, but it was a little strange to hear that news at the beginning of the week. I think it's much to do about nothing. I think the coaching staff feels confident that they're being paid. It was just unusual to have something like that once again always seeming to come up before a big game.
Yeah, that was really strange. Also ran into Nick Hopwood, Steve. He visited Joe's garage in the pregame show. You guys got to spend a little time. I just got a little drive-by with him. But I did hear someone say at Oscars, Steve, our friend Jamie dropped Nick's patented catchphrase on me, that he wants to retire with confidence.
Oh,
and
good.
I thought Nick should hear that and he would be proud.
Wonderful.
Don't we all? Maybe he was thinking more about retiring with confidence in the aftermath. We're all moving on to other pursuits.
I think it's important. I think, because a lot of people are deciding, is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? My wife doesn't want it to be this year, that kind of thing. And you want to say as a family or as a couple to say, yeah, now's the time and we got it.
Well,
so Nick will help you out with that.
I love it. Well, speaking with desiring to retire someone with confidence, I'd like to retire Arkansas State on homecoming with confidence in the first half, Steve. Did these guys bring anything to the table? I believe they're undefeated. What's going on? Tell us.
They are 2-0 for the first time, Greg, since 2008.
And go gentle, Steve. Even if they got a chance to beat us, tell me we're going to win this game.
We're going to win this game.
All right.
But it is the second time since joining the FBS in 1992 that they've been 2-0. A lot of people probably don't know that they play in the Sun Belt Conference. They're not in the preseason high rankings for the Sun Belt, but they did beat Central Arkansas 31-24. That's an FCS team. And they beat a team out of the American Athletic, Tulsa, the Golden Hurricane, 28-24. That was a second half comeback. Your head coach is Butch Jones.
Huh.
You remember him?
Yeah.
Born and raised in Saugatuck.
Didn't
went
know
to
that.
Ferris State. Did CMU for a number of years as their head coach. And then, kind of followed Brian Keller wherever he went. Cincinnati. Then he got promoted to Tennessee. And then things kind of went a little downhill from there for Butch Jones. But he has been the Arkansas State coach, I believe, since 2021. He's not going to be leading the team on the field, but Jalen Rayner is a dual threat quarterback who Saturday passed for 255, rushed for 73 last week. So this will be the first quarterback Michigan faces that actually can do a little bit of running in addition to being a threat.
Is he available?
Passing down the field.
Is he available in the portal, Steve? Dun.
Maybe
Rim shot.
Maybe for another school at a different time. But he was the freshman of the year in the Sun Belt Conference. So,
Okay.
I mean, he's obviously their best guy. Receiver Corey Rucker is on pace to be one of the Red Wolves' best receivers. Again, it's the Arkansas State Red Wolves, not the Arkansas State Wolves. We define it by color. Red Wolves. Not gray, not black, not blue. The Red Wolves. And Courtney Jackson returned his third punt for a touchdown. So if Michigan's punting in this game, they may want to know that this guy named Courtney Jackson has returned it to the house 3 times in his career. They do return 10 starters on offense, so they're a bit more experienced than last year, 5 guys on defense. More on that, my breakdown on the midweek peak on the Big 1050 WTKA segment with Sam Webb and Ira Weintraub. Wednesdays live at 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
And then it's
Excellent.
podcasted as well.
Excellent. Are you going to reflect on any of the game at all, too, or are you kind of get right into the... Okay, great.
I'd like to just talk about Arkansas State, but no, we're going to talk about Saturday's game.
All right. I'm curious to see between this podcast will drop, hopefully before then. What is that narrative? What else did we learn about this team? What did we learn in the press conferences, if anything? What are those next steps and those statements we make about the rest of the season? How is the mood of the team? We'll learn more through this week. But, Steve, we're in a big conference. There were a lot of big games, and some teams had some really good outcomes. Some people struggled. Let's take a quick whip through. Let's start with Michigan State. That's a big win at Maryland. Yeah, so Jonathan Smith, they did not look good in week 1, but there's a big difference between winning and losing. They got it done in week 1. They traveled to Maryland for the conference game, and they win on a last-second field goal. You got to tip their hat because that's, as we learned last year, win 1,000. That's not an easy place to play.
No, it was a surprise to me. I did not pick this game right. Big turnaround from last week. Receiver Nick Marsh is now a Michigan State legend with a freshman program record, 194 yards receiving, and got that big bomb that put Michigan State in the position to win that game. So now that is the second Michigan State football name I need to be familiar with as the season goes along because Michigan State almost seemed nameless during the offseason and during the summer.
Tough week for Ira, his Terps and his Wolverines going down. Oh, well, maybe you'll talk about that on Wednesday. The Buckeyes are rolling, Steve, 56-0 over Western Michigan. And now they get to troll Michigan even more for a few weeks.
Yep.
So what's going on?
Remember, Western gave Wisconsin the game into the fourth quarter last week.
Yeah.
Kind of tells you where Ohio State is right now. Western was held to just 29 yards of total offense.
What about Oregon, man? We weren't sure. They struggled again, like Michigan State. They struggled in week 1. But they struggled again. It looks like they got all they wanted this week as well.
Again, I mean, it was Boise State this time. Boise State is the favorite to win the Mountain West title. Michigan played Fresno, who's a contender for the Mountain West. But Boise is supposed to be the favorite. And they only beat Boise by 3 on a chip shot field goal as time expired. 37-34 was the score. But The reason why we talk about it is because Oregon was supposed to be on the same tier as Texas and Ohio State and Georgia. And through 2 weeks, Oregon is anything but. They needed 2 special team touchdowns in this game. Their offensive line is very underwhelming compared to expectations. They've given up 2 or more sacks than all of the sacks they've given up last year, and they're making mistakes on all phases of the game, plus taking penalties. Right now, the Buckeyes are thinking October 12th can't come soon enough.
Yeah, and put a pin in this because I want to talk about it a little later, but that is also one of the most, the well-funded NIL teams is Oregon, who's struggling with little guys who clearly don't have the resources they have. It's an interesting note, but we'll hit on that. USC has a huge win over Utah State, Steve. What's going on there? Anything to take away from USC?
Well, I mean,
they're coming in soon.
It is the first goose egg for the Trojans defense since 2011. So a lot of people going into the summer thought USC just doesn't have it in the trenches. They have it at the skill positions, but they don't have it in the trenches. Yeah, they've hired a defensive coordinator who did really well at UCLA in a single year there, but he can't turn it around in 1 year. They got their first shutout in 13 years, and they looked really good defensively against LSU. This is now a major threat to Michigan coming into Ann Arbor in just 2 weeks.
Good. We need a big game. Okay, we need Arkansas State, but then we need to play somebody else, I think, and that'll be a huge test. Indiana dropped 77 points. This was eye-opening, Steve. Is this a typo? No. 77 points on Western Illinois.
The Leathernecks. I mean, and I don't care, the proverbial cliche, I don't care who you play. If you score 77 points, you're on the right track. The Big Ten has played Western Illinois. They don't beat Western Illinois by 77-0. So Kurt Signetti at IU, who came in talking a big game, talking about, if you don't know me, Google me, I'm a winner.
Yeah.
That was a school record for not only points, but for yards. That was broken from the early 20th century. I think the record was 1906 against Franklin. And as we've talked about on The Professor and the Pundit, in 1906, you might have been playing a prep school or a high school team and counting it as a win. I don't know if Franklin was a college or what, but that was the record that stood tall for 100 and some years at Indiana, and it just got broke by a rookie coach for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, wild. Penn State gets taken down to the wire after their really what looked like a great win over West Virginia. Bowling Green.
Haven't seen the details on that, but how about lefty coach Scott Loeffler? He pulled off a big upset against Minnesota a few years back in PJ Fleck. This would have been much bigger coming off of what Penn State just did, a top 10 team in the country. And Bowling Green just didn't make a game of it at the end. They started off taking a 7-0 lead early, 2 minutes into the game, and they were playing back and forth with Penn State all game long. They just fell a little short at the end.
And we got almost the version of James Franklin I like, which is the feisty post-game guy who's sweating a little bit and calling out people. We got a little of that, which we always enjoy. Nebraska and Colorado. This one had a lot of eyeballs just because Deion Sanders gets a lot of eyeballs. The Nebraska program with their new staff, new quarterback gets a lot of eyeballs. What happened here, Steve?
Nebraska went up 28-0 on Colorado, but the defense is now the story for the Cornhuskers. This is a team that have reinstated the black shirts about a dozen times over the last 20 years, only to be stripped off a week later. I think they're currently wearing the black shirts and mentioning the moniker and taking pride in their defense. They had a pick six in the game, and since losing to Michigan 45-7 last year, the Huskers haven't allowed an opponent to score more than 24 points. So there's some things going on. They talked about Matt Rule in year 2, and everywhere that he's been, at Temple, at Baylor, and now at Nebraska. Matt Rule may have Nebraska humming. Could be a 9-10 win team this year.
One of the great early season games for so long has always been this Iowa State game, Steve. I'm sure you follow it. Your wife loves Iowa. It's just frequently a really good game. Iowa State, they get it done on a 54-yard field goal and take down Iowa. What happened here?
It was a late 54-yard field goal that won it for them. It's always a good game because the scores, when they're that low, when the offense can't produce for either team and the defenses are more dominant, it always is going to be a one-possession game. Are they ever more than interesting than just being a low-scoring tight game? Probably not, but there's usually something that happens, like a scoop and score or a pick six, that drives it the other way. Iowa State had a big winning streak, then Iowa had a big streak. There was one time where the home team couldn't win this series. So
it's kind
just
of a
one
cool
of those
tradition, though, that it's like a trophy game that these kind of things are normally played in the later part of the season. It's that early trophy game, but it's a legit one, right?
Because it's in different conferences.
Yeah, no,
it's
it
Big
makes
12
sense.
versus the Big 10, so it is going to be played in September. It's a poor man's version of Michigan State in terms of an in-state rivalry. And there's been instances about, marching band members, having food thrown at them kind of thing. And it's just, there's always, so there's a little bit of hate.
And I want to say, speaking of that, Washington and Washington State are still on the schedule. They play like next week for the Apple Cup, so that'll be fun to watch.
And Oregon State play next week as well. So that's how they kind of fit these in. They're in two different conferences now. When do you play them? You play them in September, so you still keep those rivalries intact.
I like it. This made me feel a little better, Steve, when I was about to talk about it around the nation.
Little Schadenfreude.
Holy touchdown, Jesus, Steve. I was talking about maintain your dignity. Like, I was slobbering all over Notre Dame. Me, Rick Neuheisel.
Put this in your pipe and smoke.
Lots of pundits around the nation.
Pundits.
They beat Texas A&M on the road in a huge game. Looked pretty good. They're for real. With their schedule, we all projected out, all of us. They're in the playoff. They lose to Northern Illinois in South Bend, 16-14. Their coach, Thomas Hammock, he takes the title of the most teary, sloppy post-game interview from Sharon Moore.
Oh, that's a good thing.
He's sloppy. His eyes are welled up. He's crying. He's taking deep breaths. He needs a towel.
And considering you not only won, okay, so this is Northern Illinois' first win over a top 10 program ever. The Mid-American Conference is going to be reveling in this for a decade. One of the reasons why you might cry and get teary, because you almost had the game stolen from you at the very end. Northern Illinois should have been able to run the clock out and kick a chip shot field goal. Instead, they had a poorly marked spot for fourth down.
Steve and I were texting. We were texting during this. Did you hear anyone talk about this? Because I saw the same thing you did. That unless the TV line was wrong, which it never is, it's never wrong. The TV first down line, the guy ran right through it, went down. There was contact, but he was straight up enough. Yeah. Went right over it. He was at least 1.5 yards to 2 yards past the line. They called it a yard short of the line, and they reviewed it. Yep. They reviewed it, so what it forced them to do was kick from this farther spot, and the guy made a pretty long field goal. First of all, it made a hard field goal, and it gave Notre Dame the clock back, and they had a timeout. So it was horrible. But no one's talking about it because it didn't matter.
No, because it didn't matter at the end because Northern Illinois played some defense. But they should have been able to run the clock out. Didn't. Okay, so the bad spot and the replay couldn't confirm it either way. So you go with the original call, all right? Couldn't find a good camera angle for some reason in South Bend. So
it was some home cooking,
that's crazy.
Dude. It was some home cooking.
But there was a Notre Dame injury on the play before, and then because the Northern Illinois guy challenged it, it saved a timeout that Notre Dame would have used otherwise. So instead of having 30 seconds and no timeouts, they had 30 seconds and a timeout to boot, and all they needed to do was get into field goal range. But, I mean, after that moment where nothing goes your way and you've worked so hard, and then if you win it anyway, yeah, I'd probably cry too.
It was fun. We needed that. Sorry, we haven't been in this situation for a long time. We needed that. I'll say one more thing about Notre Dame, and I touched on it with Oregon. If there are people that are at the top of the mountain of NIL, Notre Dame is one of them. Just trust me. They've been a leader from the start. They didn't get the Nike money and all that stuff like Oregon did. Kind of a little later, they really kicked it into gear. No. Notre Dame's been on top of this from the start. Not only the funding and the support from the leadership clearly at the school, they're sophisticated in their messaging to recruits and transfers. They say, look, here's the plan. You stay here. Here's how much. Here's what sophomores make in your position. Here's the upside quarterback. Took care of a transfer quarterback twice. So it's a stark, you know that NIU, they have a collective. It's called the Boneyard Victor E. Victor space letter E, Steve. Like victory. I don't know. There's probably a pun there somewhere I don't get. They ask people for $8.99 a month commitment. That's their lead-in on their collective page. Notre Dame has probably closer to Ohio State money, and they've had it for a while. And we all are concerned about NIL. How are we going to have a roster without NIL? They've got it. And they just lost to NIU. It's startling to me. I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked, I should say. But it's notable that a big team like that lost to such a small David like this in this situation. Steve.
One thing I'm going to predict is that college football teams are going to be more fragile than ever. Fragile. You could have a balloon just swell up, but a little pin can burst that balloon. And if a group of people paying that much money for NIL and lose that game, does it change support? You're not just one bad head coach away from being a program that disintegrates, but you could pick the wrong coordinator or you could pick the wrong quarterback. It can lead to a mass exodus because they see this team is not going to make it to the top. And the way you can go into the portal and leave one school to another, you can have people just leaving in droves under the mildest of emergencies.
Yeah, you made a joke about Colorado, a reference to Colorado, and we heard some pundits on the radio really picking on that program. But the fact is, that's probably one of them that's probably in a pretty fragile state right now, and they probably pissed off some fans about, and Nebraska was a big rivalry for them back in the day. We both know that. We'll see how these
Florida
teams hold
State.
up. Yeah, and frankly, we've got a little fragility here. We've got a lot of big donors back in our collective. That was a little rough on Saturday. We'll survive, but we'll see how if it changes people's behavior or maybe have people ask more questions. So we'll see. Steve, I feel like those last two topics were probably things only Steve and Greg care about.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Everybody knows nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody cares.
I care.
Then do whatever you want.
So we'll see. Anything else, man? I think we got to wrap it up.
It's Arkansas State coming up this Saturday. We'll review that, and then all eyes and ears will be on this USC football game. And I think there's a lot of ramifications on that. Michigan's got to win that game on the 21st.
Yeah.
As the weeks roll by.
Oh, it's homecoming, though. Come on, chins up, guys. Look for those cheerleaders with their 1950s sweaters on out there. A noon kick?
It's a noon kick.
Noon kick. All right, perfect. Let's get the game. Let's get the victory, and let's have a good Saturday.
And let's enjoy football in general because Michigan football is still on the top as the reigning national champions. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue, Steve.